Welcome back to the Unchained Binge podcast, everybody. I mistakenly called this the Unhinged podcast to my dad this morning, and I feel like that's kind of where we are after making 8 episodes in about a week here.
Yep.
But we have the final episode to talk about, plus the whole series, kind of wrap it all up. It was a great episode. I loved this one. Much more positive about it than we were yesterday or off of episode 7. Joining me today, welcome back, still in Norway, Ian Trellor. How are you?
Oh, hey, hi. Yeah, good.
And Johnny Long.
Hello.
Welcome. Still has a Netflix account. Kit Nicholson. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Kit, what happens in episode 8? I need more zhuzh.
Zhuzh.
Kit.
It's a good word. Okay. The finale brings us up close and personal with the other big French team and their enigmatic and beloved figurehead, Thibaut Pinot, who's racing his final tour before retirement. The episode also finally addresses the long-teased feud or storm in a teacup that is the war of words between Richard Plugger and Marc Madiot. And we also revisit the class clowns on the Alpecin de Koning bus as Jasper, the not master disaster, aims for one last victory on the Champs-Élysées. There we go.
It's the Pinot episode.
Yeah.
It's the Madiot episode. I think more broadly for me, it was the pick a team episode. Pick a side. Are you light or dark? Are you French or Dutch?
Jedi or
Are
Sith?
you fun? Are you fun and drinking beer, or are you dour and angry
and winning
and only care about winning the yellow jersey and winning? And I think that we'll have that debate in a little bit here. But first, let's get to our main characters of this particular episode. Thibaut Pinot. He's been peppered throughout the show, right? He's been thrown in at various places. We kind of have some understanding of who he is. I think similar to Alaphilippe, we were talking about in the last episode, he's like, there's some assumption that the French public probably sort of vaguely knows who he is, and so we didn't get a whole lot of explanation. But we get a lot of Pinot this particular time. We get him pulling up a world record carrot. We get him doing all sorts of fun things at a farm. What else can we add to the Pinot mystique and narrative that wasn't included in the show?
Well, it might be worth just kind of explaining a bit of his career because, it particularly to those who are fairly new to the sport, because I think he's been with Groupama FDJ as Marc Madiot specifies. It's been something like 14, 15 years that he's with the same squad. And he won a handful of Tour de France stages. He's particularly good in the mountains. He won the white jersey 1 year, so best young rider. For a long time he was considered France's greatest hope to win the Tour de France. But latterly he became the kind of maverick stage hunter, the guy who is just kind of oozes passion and sometimes goes and with tactics that are slightly dubious in their intelligence. But it's just
dubious in their intelligence. That's
it's that kind of take a risk and go all in, and don't care, just ride on passion and heart, and he's kind of mellowed in his later years, and just I remember commenting last year that he was just strolling around in sandals and a crumpled t-shirt, and just kind of having a nice time, and it was very much the same this year. He said he was feeling freer having announced his retirement, and that's the Pinot that we get to see.
I think he's kind of the archetype of that sort of doomed mercurial Frenchman as a cyclist, because he's won 3 tour stages. I think
so
that's
not even
right.
a handful, just a couple,
just a
few.
smash,
three.
A smash,
three.
And he's done well in the Giro and all those kind of things. But all of those victories have kind of been counterbalanced by this undercurrent of tragedy in the dramatic and horrible ways that he's gone out of the race. Like in 2019, he won on the Tourmalet and was widely regarded as possibly that was his year to win. And then late in the race, still within striking distance of the podium, he dropped out with a corked thigh or something from a crash earlier on in the stage, just an innocuous crash. And the state of mourning that French TV went into on that day, very dramatic day. So he went out of the race.
Well, he was weeping on his bike. I mean, you don't often see that. It was a very dramatic moment.
It was sad.
Yeah, it was beautiful in its sadness, in its emotion.
Yeah. And then he climbs into the car, and then the paparazzi, not paparazzi, but, that was the vibe. just like lenses flashing whilst he's like sobbing in the back seat, and then endless replays of him getting massaged whilst crying, and then lots more crying, and then there was an avalanche, and the stage got cancelled. So it was a hell of a day. Anyway, so that is Thibaut Pinot. He really beloved, really gave it a crack, did have some very popular wins, and was loved almost as much for the way that he lost as the way that he won.
I do like, though, amidst all the what we expected of like the Pinot loving and the romanticism, we do get an amazing insight from Netflix, who are doing some sort of Pinot revisionism, or like before we've even got to the main meat of the Pinot bit, when it's just Pinot sitting in the bus and he says, "Fuck's sake, my balls hurt," which is the most un-Pinot Pinot line ever. Like when just as he's been held up as this sort of like god who captured everyone's hearts when it doesn't actually matter how good he is, we realise that he is actually just a human who's been riding his bike for 20 days and, you know, he's just in agony.
His balls hurt.
And his balls hurt. Yeah. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, but it's kind of fitting into that working class hero kind of framework as well.
Yeah, like the people's champion. You know, who doesn't, his balls don't hurt from time to time.
Yeah, the revolutionary French.
We don't meet, but we see a lot of Marc Matteo in this one, who is Pinot's general manager. Marc Matteo's run that team for a very long time.
He's Pinot's enabler, is what he is.
He's Pinot's enabler. He is, but in the show, he is portrayed as the anti-Richard Pluga, right? Absolutely. They literally cut back and forth between these two guys. You have Matteo saying something sort of silly and romantic, and Pluga looking dour as fuck, just being like, all I want to do is win.
Doing his Darth Vader impression.
Just win to win the yellow jersey, and nothing else matters. And things like that. So it is sort of like, that's one of the sort of primary, I guess, points of tension in the whole show. Is like they're trying, the Netflix is trying to portray sort of these two versions of cycling, and I think this isn't hammed up, right? Like, this is reality. This is what the Tour feels like these days. The Tour feels like you got these teams that are the romantic teams, the lovable losers teams, really, because they don't win much anymore. And then you've got the sort of like modern, data-driven, soulless number cruncher teams, right? And that's Visma. It was Ineos for a long time. And it is very much, it's an accurate reflection of what the Tour de France feels like these days. And I think that's why I like this episode so much, is it kind of forces you to pick a team. And it definitely, you can tell what team Netflix is on. You can absolutely tell what team Netflix is on. Netflix is on team Marc Matteo, yes, all the way. But like, we should have had Ronan on this episode, because I'm intrigued to hear, like, you know, Ronan likes a bit of optimization, a bit of number crunching, a bit of that sort of thing, and appreciates that more than like maybe I do, right? Where I find it abhorrent most of the time.
Strong word.
I think it ruins cycling. And, you know, Ronan and I, like, we don't see eye to eye on this in the same way that, like, I'm not saying Ronan is Richard Pluga here, but
he is.
Yeah, we did, like, there's different perspectives on the sport, and people get enjoyment from different places out of the sport. And I think, yeah, that's why I like this episode. It was a good reflection of that. So what else can we add about Matteo?
Well,
before we move on, what else can we add about Matteo?
He likes beer.
Really quick.
Okay, sorry.
Really quick. Before we get into the beer stuff, a bit of Marc Matteo history. He was actually a very good bike racer back in the day. A very, very good bike racer back in the day. I think that this is worth mentioning, because he's not just coming from a place of like pure romanticism. He's coming at this from a place of, I won bike races in this way, right? So Matteo won 2 Paris-Roubaix. Matteo won 2 Paris-Roubaix, right? So Paris-Roubaix being the Cobble Classic in usually April. Lots of cobbles. One of the hardest one days of, if not the hardest one day of the year. Won a stage of the Tour de France. Won a whole pile of other stuff. Won a stage of Paris-Nice. Won a stage of Tirreno. Like, he was a good bike racer. This is all in the sort of mid 80s. Like, he won his Roubaix in 85 and 91, and that 91 victory was, I think, one of his last major victories, if not his last major victory. So he comes at this from a place of having won bike races off nothing but heart and whatever else they were on in the 80s.
Heart, effort, and goosebumps, as he says later in the episode. That's how they race.
I mean, I don't want to cast aspersions, but like a lot of the peloton was on amphetamines in the mid 80s. So, but maybe a bit of that as well, causing some goosebumps. We don't know. But anyway, Mark Matteo comes at from that perspective. Now we can get to the beer. Johnny, tell me about the beer.
First question. Does Pinot admit that he was the beer drinker on the rest day? Because he says, I don't need someone telling me if I can have a beer or not, which sounds defiant. Or is he just saying in general?
Pinot was generally just defiant. Pinot was just kind of like, I think by the time they got to him in the studio, we know how he spent his off season last year.
Drinking beers with Richard Plugger.
Double parked in football stadiums. He was having a good time. I would not be at all surprised if he had a beer on each rest day. If he had 3 beers on each rest day.
Pogacar has a beer before mid-stage race. That's the thing with all Richard Plugger's bluster. And like he says it's like, some sort of psyop campaign. But he does kind of mean it. But it doesn't take away from the fact that Pogacar has also admitted to having a beer during a stage race, which he won. I think it was Catalonia. So it's just, I don't know. It just makes you even more on the side of the nice French people.
Well, the fact also that Richard Plugger kept saying something inflammatory and then being like, I don't know why anyone takes it seriously. It's like, exactly why somebody took it serious, because you wanted them to, and you wanted to deflect the focus. It's just kind of spin. He's a spin doctor.
I mean, the intent was to move the news cycle on.
Yeah.
From doping accusations. How much did you enjoy Matteo when he was saying like pitoyable? When he was like spitting and when he just found out about the accusations. That was so good.
Yeah, I was trying to imagine how that came about, because it was dinner and it was dark outside. So it must have been like 8 or 9 o'clock. So they were probably, it was late dinner after they transferred from the end of the last stage into the next stage. And so he'd gone to, I don't know, gone to the bathroom and checked his phone and seen on Twitter that all this crap was going down, and then come back and stand at the table while the riders are finishing their dinner. Just going, this is your motivation for tomorrow. I'm not having this.
It's when he comes back in, like Pinot's just there trying to eat, like his cap's on backwards, like he's just smoked a bowl, just trying to eat his dinner. And then Grandpa comes in, just being like, I've just been on the Twitter, and you'll never guess what they're saying on there. And Pinot's just there, like, I don't need this now. Like, just leave me alone. He's like, my head's a bit. I'm getting the zoomies. I just need you to go away.
And then Matteo is like, cheers, Richard, with a nice pint of beer.
he drinks those pints so angrily. He's just there, like, and also I didn't know you could get those proper pint glasses like that in like these small French towns. That's like a proper sort of like Brexit
like
means Brexit
pub.
pint glass. Yeah. And Mark Matteo definitely doesn't. Yeah, he probably doesn't drink pints like that, I'd imagine. Like the French thing is to have a small one, right? And he's just there, just
small,
like
squat glass
drowning
bottle.
in lager just to prove someone wrong.
Is anybody going to take the side of Richard Plugger here?
Yeah.
In general, I'm not talking about this instance specifically. I'm talking in general. So like in this sort of, Netflix is demanding that we pick sides in this episode, right? And I'm going to read 2 quick quotes, which I think I just liked the 2 quotes. So from Mark Matteo, from Team Mark Matteo, we have, suddenly 14 years of Pinot came crashing down on me. Which I just love as
when he was crying in the car.
Yeah, when he's crying in the car, and he's Pinot's been on his team basically his entire career, and that crashed down upon him, right? The sort of romance of that, the history and all the rest, and then on the other side, and then from Plugger, the reason I included this line is because Mark Matteo's fundamental argument is that it is a popularity prize.
It is.
Right?
It kind of is.
I think that is. So he's basically saying, like, I mean, he literally says this in the show, that he would like rather lose well.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that, like that comes back to, again, this is sort of like fundamental discussion in not just in cycling, but in sport in general, I think, because as sport sort of quote unquote professionalizes and analytics and all the rest, you lose a bit of the romance. You definitely lose a bit of the romance. You maybe lose a bit of your ability to win that popularity prize. Like, I just kept coming back to, I know that like the Danish people love Jonas Vingegaard, right? Like when he went back after winning the Tour, he like filled an entire square full of very excited people. But I'm not sure at the end of his career we will see a Vingegaard corner like we saw for Pinot, right? And Pinot did less. Pinot never won a Tour de France. right? Pinot was the lovable loser for most of his career. And yet he managed to sort of touch people in this way, reach people in this way, to the point where thousands and thousands of people went to a corner to cheer him. It's sort of like the last pass through his area of France is basically they were in his backyard. And I don't think Vingegaard will ever get that. And I think a big part of the reason he'll never get that is because of the attitude of his team, which is also probably the reason why he'll win more Tours de France, or already has won more Tours de France than Thibaut Pinot.
Yeah. I remember, so last year after this stage, Ian wrote about how that corner had gained Google Maps reference or something. It had been, I don't know, entered into the digital history books. But yeah, I wrote a piece on how the French seem to have this passion for losing, and there's actually one of the groups that helped organise the Virage Pinot was the Fédération de la Loze, basically the Federation of Losers of Losing, and somebody pointed out that actually, although on the face of it, to us, to non-French or to people who weren't tuned into this particular mindset or ethos, to see Pinot be the first one to go through there from the whole race was just perfect. Whether or not he won the stage, obviously that would have been that would seem to be the perfect ending, but it would actually, somebody pointed out via that group that actually it might have been better if he'd been the last one to come through and if it had been pouring with rain, because that's the kind of the losing beautifully, or the grace in defeat. And even Marc Madiot said, by this point Pinot hadn't won the stage, so read into that what you will, but Madiot said it's almost better that he did lose, it's almost better that he didn't win. But what's interesting, to go back to your question, will anyone take Plugger's point of view? When I remember reading some of the comments on that article that I wrote about lovable losers, some people were like, I don't care if you if you've got passion. I'm not going to root for somebody because they made a tactical faux pas and shouldn't have left their teammate behind and just went to ride through the crowd of fans. I'd rather see you go and win. Some people are just scientific and want to see. It's like maybe it's the F1 element to it, where it's not just about the driver, it's about the car. It's not just about the riders, it's about the tactics, the bike, the team, the budget, the resources. It's about all the preparation. So there will be some people at least buying into what Plugger's saying, maybe not standing behind him as a person, but definitely taking that sort of element of sport and not maybe going with the romance of the French.
I think the problem is that it's the same with Sky a bit, right? When they were dominant and winning, is that if you don't do it gracefully, then it's just kind of bad vibes. And like no one necessarily begrudges someone winning, because that is kind of the point. Like if we didn't have the winning aspect, then it'd all be quite pointless. It'd be a big sportive that we're all go spend 3 weeks covering. But then there's the point when Richard Plugger says about Madiot and about how angry he got over the whole beer thing, where he says, if it touches a nerve, maybe that's something to think about for yourself. And it's like, there are numerous times where we've said our stuff of Jumbo-Visma and their riders that has touched a nerve. So it's like, if you're going to be right, you've got to be completely right. And if you want to be right and winning and be like, this is the way to do it, then you've got to make sure you're on it. Because otherwise it comes across, I don't know, it's like you're caught in between the both, right? Hypocritical, and you're caught in between having no vibes to also having no vibes and being dicks. I don't know. And like
the biggest nerve we've ever touched with them was when we asked about doping. So by his logic, he should maybe ask himself some questions around that.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're a vibes-based operation, as Madiot is, and maybe it's not for everyone, but it's like vibes don't have to be quantified. It's a feeling.
Yeah.
And it's up to your design, because you've set the rules around it, and then it's up to everyone else whether they get on board with it. Like Movistar have a set of vibes, I guess, but unfortunately, not many people are into it. But that's
if you go to Spain, they are.
Well, kind of. But
not many English speakers are into it.
Well, yeah, I guess they are.
No, they're into it. Yeah, the Spanish people love Movistar. And like I said, like I don't want to downplay. Jonas Vingegaard filled a square when he went back, right? But like Thibaut Pinot manages to fill a square without winning. And I think that is really valuable. And I think that is something that the sport needs to try to retain, right? And it's not even the lovable losers thing. It's just like the connection to people, connection to fans, connection to, you can connect to people in ways other than victory, right? And there are other examples of this. So like in the sort of gravel space these days, we've got Lachlan Morton, right? Like, yeah, Lachlan does win some stuff, and you need to have been good to begin with, right? And I think that is worth mentioning with Pinot, is like the start of this is the fact that he was the next great French hope, right? There was hope that he could win the thing. And that is necessary for the beginning of the narrative. But if he ends up winning it or not winning it, actually becomes irrelevant at some point. And I think that is actually a more powerful connection to audience. And so, I mean, it's very clear, obviously, I'm on team Matteo here. I also don't think it's particularly surprising that the four of us are generally in agreement, because I think we are largely a vibes-based organization.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we sort of fit in that mold a little bit.
Also prefer a story to a formula.
Yeah.
And there's definitely that difference there. It's quite kind of methodical at Jumbo-Visma, Visma-Leasebike as they are now. Whereas with Groupama FDJ, it's so often, well, how is this story going to go? We actually don't know. And we don't really have, well, we do have a plan. We don't have much of a plan. We don't know what things are going to happen. Whereas you get the impression that Jumbo-Visma, as we said in 2 episodes ago in the time trial, they were so confident in what they were about to do that they knew they were going to get a result. I think, they were confident they were going to get a result. And I don't think, when you're riding like Madio's team is, that there's much more. Well, I suppose there's much more creativity to it. You've got to see what happens, and it's just a bit more kind of interesting, I suppose, than seeing whether something can work that you're going to predict.
That's a nice way to put it. Creativity.
But again, there's absolutely an alternative perspective here, which is an enjoyment in the optimization, an enjoyment in the numbers, an enjoyment in that side of the sport, right? And that's totally valid. Like I said, I kind of wish we had Ronan here, because he does tend to defend that a bit more than the rest of us. And I think it is, I'm sure there are listeners out there yelling into their earbuds right now saying, like, no, like Visma's doing it the right way, and Mark Matteo is an old school idiot, right? Because that is absolutely that's a pretty valid perspective, right? Like Matteo they don't win anything. They just sort of float around being very French in a French bike race, and so sort of automatically getting a lot more attention than they would otherwise deserve, right? "Quote unquote" deserve from a results perspective. Like that's pretty valid, and I like to see an incredible result, right? I like to see a plan well executed. I think my issue in this was just that Richard Pluga seems like a real dickhead.
He's just a dick.
Like, just a
that's
dick.
the first thing that
God.
I wrote on my piece of paper. Just Pluga is a dick. It's my main takeaway.
I've spoken with the guy in person. I've done sort of scrums with other reporters. We've surrounded him and stuck microphones in his face at the Tour de France, and it's a pretty accurate representation of the way that he conducts himself with media. I'm not saying he's a dick to his friends or people that he like exists with outside of pro cycling, but it's a pretty, like, what we see in Netflix is a pretty accurate reflection of the way that he interacts with us at the Tour de France, right? So that is very much as and dick, which is very like quick. Like Brailsford used to be a dick, right? Wiggins has been a dick. Mark Cavendish was a dick.
All the sirs, the knights of the round table.
It turns out being a dick makes you a sir. So there you go. It can be an effective means of achieving knighthood.
The thing is that while it seemed to be painted as this master plan of the way that it helps them win, like we saw it when they're saying thanks Richard in the car as their car's getting like bashed around on the climb, is that in the long run it probably doesn't help you, right? But I guess you're focused on winning now. And we saw that with UAE, how they won when Pogacar won those first 2 tours, and he really wasn't very popular at all because he was so dominant and he wasn't as good with the media. But then they figured it out and how to show who he is and his personality. And now it means that he's not bogged down in the same way that Visma are, which must help, right? And be a better strategy.
But it also kind of shows that, yes, if UAE could do it, you could also do this, Jumbo Visma. You could optimize not being a dickhead.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not
Well, but you know how they're going to do it. You know how Vingegaard's going to become a fan favorite.
losing
Gonna
this year.
lose.
Is losing.
He's going to lose the Tour de France. That's what Pogacar needed to become
Yeah.
a fan favorite. He had
Yeah.
to lose the Tour de France, and something about cycling fandom, and we are a reflection of that, right? Something about cycling fandom. We love when people get beat. We love when people are human. We love when people fail. We love when they fail in a human way, right?
And that's what Groupama FDJ represents.
They are the most human failures of the Tour de France. Yes. And so we all get behind them, right? And we love Thibaut Pinot. It's great. All right. We've discussed this particular storyline enough. There was other things that happened in episode 8. Philipsen. Yes, Philipsen lost on the Champs-Élysées. Jordi Meus, who most of us would not have picked to win that particular sprint, won on the Champs. What do we do with Philipsen?
We will get back to the Philipsen in this, but I think an interesting counter Philipsen is the Tour de France a couple of years earlier, where he was crying on the Champs-Élysées and everyone saw him very sympathetically because he didn't get a win at that edition of the Tour. So I think that ties into that underdog thing, and now he's very much not an underdog, and he's also not really very likable now. But
No, yeah. And Rudolph kind of explained that story, didn't he? And,
That was great.
saying and it changed you as a rider, and he's a bit more arrogant. And then Philipsen goes, arrogant? Just don't give a shit. And it's just kind of, a perfect punchline to the story.
That was good. That
Not
team
a-
bus scene.
listen, being a classy winner is important, right?
Yeah.
To Vingegaard's credit, he's always been a classy winner.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I
but-
will say that.
Yeah. Do you think he means
Philipsen,
it
not
though?
so much.
Do you think Vingo means it when he's saying these things?
I
I
do.
I think he's a really nice guy.
I
think he's-
believe in him. I think. Well, I believe he's not laying anything on. I don't think he's exaggerating what he's.
How about some additional Vingegaard sort of personality context from the Vuelta last year, for example? So Vuelta last year, we've got Jumbo-Visma taking the top 3 positions in the overall, with Vingegaard, Roglic, who was still on that team, and Sepp Kuss, the American Eagle. And Sepp was leading. He's been a loyal domestique for years and years and years. He rarely gets a chance to ride for himself. He's leading the bike race. No one else from another team is going to catch him. So the only riders that could beat him at this Vuelta are his own teammates, right? Now, one of those teammates, Primož Roglic, bit more of a killer, has no problem with that. He has no problem dropping Sepp Kuss and trying to win the bike race. He does eventually get reined in. Vingegaard does a bit of the same, but then kind of catches himself. And it's quite clear in all the post-race interviews and all the quotes and everything else. Johnny, you don't believe
Johnny
him.
was
but
very,
this
I
is-
remember Johnny getting quite
This is a
red in the face
misremembering of history.
last year.
This is a misremembering of history.
No.
No,
Yeah,
Johnny,
Roglic went
you,
up
mate.
the road. Roglic went up the road,
Yeah.
and Vingegaard looked behind at Kuss and then went after Roglic. Now, what we have here is Roglic being true to who he is, not giving a fuck about anyone else apart from himself. And we have Vingegaard knowing the right thing to do, that like most reasonable non-Roglic people would do, and then making the wrong decision, which I think is morally more corrupt than just being like, look, I'm all in for myself. I don't care about Sepp Kuss. Like, nice guy, but bye, see you later. Like that, and then it doesn't matter what you do afterwards for the
forgotten that
cameras,
exact scene,
because look,
Yeah.
that's what I don't want to get into the weeds with this, but I'm just saying that we like to paint Roglic as this guy. Roglic has not lied to anyone. Afterwards he's like, look, I want to win. I've got a responsibility to win. It's like, well, not a responsibility, but do you. Anyway.
He was promised leadership of the Vuelta. Yeah, I mean, you're right, Johnny. That moment was a bit questionable, but yeah,
I don't know why I care
think,
so much.
I think those.
I don't know why I care.
I think those decisions.
I remember during the Vuelta last year, it was dramatic. It was fiery.
I think those decisions are harder to make in the moment than you're giving him credit for.
I
Johnny.
think
Like,
around the race,
and
after the stages,
maybe.
Vingegaard seemed a little bit more level-headed than Roglic did, at least in Sepp Kuss's corner, I think.
Yeah, you as a bike racer, you've also been trained literally since you started racing to follow anything. Right,
True.
like
Yeah, fair enough.
you just automatically you just follow. So that's I think.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Okay.
we're getting off track
Yeah,
here.
back.
Back to
Let's
Philipsen.
bring it back. Let's bring it back to Philipsen.
Yeah.
Who, despite having some troubles early on his career, has not become the most classy winner. But then again, sprinters pretty much never are, right? Like whoever's the best sprinter in the world is pretty much always being a dickhead at that point in time. It's kind of part of part of the thing, right? Like,
what about-
and then when they start to fall off the other side, like Cav is suddenly likable again because he like doesn't win everything and he's just trying to win one more. It's just one more, and all of a sudden we care, right?
I just have one question about Philipsen. His gut never related more to a professional rider, but also is that just because of how much he's had to eat during the race?
Oh, he was pushing. He was forcing that out. He was forcing
it out, but it was still pretty impressive. Like
they do a lot of like belly breathing. Pro cyclists do a lot of belly breathing, so he may just sort of have a particular
belly breathing
ability there.
What is that?
Yeah, Alexander Kristoff goes on about it quite a lot.
Yeah. So you breathe with your sort of like belly and diaphragm versus your sort of like upper chest because you can get more air into your lungs.
Oh, I've literally never heard of that.
Yeah.
There we go.
Breathing. So like sometimes you see a photo of riders from the side in the breakaway or something like that, right? And they look like they have a pooch, but they do not have a pooch.
I have one more question.
Does pooch translate to English?
A paunch?
Would be the close. Yeah.
Okay, so you have a paunch. We call it a pooch.
Pooch. A pooch over here is a dog.
Maybe just my family does. I don't know.
I don't like pooch. I'll come out and say it now.
Yeah, no, that doesn't sound great. I have a question for you guys. Do you think so? The first time we met Philipsen in this series, he said he wanted to recondition his persona from Jasper the disaster to Jasper the master. Successful?
No,
he lost me when he said that. Not. To be honest, at the start.
I mean, like you could tell that even Netflix was like, "You are not going to be successful in this because we're going to show you with your exploded luggage on the first episode and the last episode. We're going to remind everybody. We're going to bring it. We're going to tie a nice bow around this disaster, and we're going to not ever let you let that down or live that down."
They managed to make the whole team look a bit like a disaster by the end as well, because I think part of the reason. Well, I mean, in the team car, one of them mentions, I think. Bora is like, Bora's nothing to think. They're not going to do anything. Don't worry about Bora. No. And then Jordi Meus wins the stage, and he has one of the quotes of the episode saying, "It's nice to beat the invincible rider." And it was a good finale.
He's not even going to the tour this year.
Is he not?
He's not even going to the tour this year.
Well, no, because they're going all in for GC, aren't they?
Oh yeah, of course.
They're a Roglic team now.
He's an interesting guy, isn't he? Sort of like a substitute teacher sort of vibes. Like quite friendly. like if you just saw him, you wouldn't think he was a Champs-Élysées winning sprinter if you just saw like his face.
I was going to say chiropractor.
Yeah. Therapist.
Physio.
Yep.
Yeah, physio.
Yeah, physio. Maybe just because I've had two chiropractors that were both bald dudes.
Maybe it's just that.
Maybe it's just that. Let's get to our awards. Should we hand them out for the whole series?
Yeah.
Do they not get them in this episode?
No, let's just hand them out for the whole series. But there'll be a fair amount of recency bias, so they still stand a chance. So, Golden Raspberry Award, worst acting of the entire.
The highlight for me is
show.
Rod Ellingworth.
Let's go around for each of these, and we'll give out
the low light.
We'll give out.
It's between Rod Ellingworth and Ant McCrossan for me, but I think Rod Ellingworth takes the biscuit.
Rough.
And I mean, and remember what I said about Ant McCrossan is it was Netflix throwing him under the bus. And they did the same for Rod Ellingworth, but Rod Ellingworth had to do it more and did it worse.
I would say my vote would be Jasper Philipsen. I think every time he's had to be fed a line to move the narrative on, it's just made me sort of tense up, and I've really deeply unenjoyed him trying to do anything in a pretend to be authentic. Like when he has been authentic, like messing around with his little bromance with Van der Poel, it's made him quite likable. But anytime he has to talk himself up in the talking heads bit, just don't know, it makes me feel a bit not great.
I'm also on Team Jasper Philipsen for that matter. I haven't watched all the episodes. There's a little spoiler for you because I needed to cram this in to get ready for this one. But the one that really gave me the ick was him talking to his partner in their immaculate house where I think they were speaking in English, which I'm sure they don't do to each other. Surely not. And it was just
Definitely not.
Basic 101 cycling. Let's explain what my job is and whether I like doing it and what this Tour de France is going to mean for me. She was pretty bad at it too, to be honest.
We made a call not to throw any of the partners under the bus because they were pulled into this not of their own decision making.
And they have enough shit to put up with
Not their
normally in
fault.
their daily lives, going out with
Okay,
bike
withdrawn.
riders.
Sorry,
Withdrawn.
Jasper Philipson's partner. You did great.
I'm going with Rod Ellingworth. So that means do we have
Withdraw.
2 votes in favor?
Rod Phillipson. We'll give it to Rod Phillipson.
Ellingworth,
Yeah, go on then.
our official golden raspberry winner.
Actually, yeah, that's that
melodrama.
scene. That scene when he was in the meeting
Yeah.
room, that was bad. I forgot about that.
Melodrama award.
Ben
I think there are a
O'Connor.
couple of options here. There's Ben O'Connor, and then there's just all the French.
Yeah, but melodrama
The
is
nation of
like
France.
France's fourth biggest industry, I think. So you can't.
Can we nail it down to like a few seconds?
Yeah. It could be a quote.
Yeah. Ben O'Connor screaming, "Fuck!
Yeah.
Shit!
That was
Fuck!"
He's
into his
already
chest
won.
whilst
He's already
getting
won an
dropped.
award for that. So yeah, definitely
Yeah.
in the running. Yeah.
That one I think is it for me because
Yeah.
he bothered to do it into his radio,
Yes.
which is exceptionally melodramatic because you can just yell that to yourself.
Mm.
But he felt the need to yell it to all of his teammates and the team car.
Hey fellas, I've got something to say. Just like screaming into their earpieces. Oh, Ben's on one.
Congratulations, Ben O'Connor, for winning the Melodrama Award for the entire of Series 2. Smooth Operator.
Well, it's going to be Jai Hindley, or because we put him in the
Oh.
running for the but
Yeah.
so it's him or potentially Alaphilippe. So
I think Alaphilippe.
I particularly liked the way that he was dealing with the Lefebvre situation, and also his last line in the show, which I think was in this episode, oddly enough, was "I'll let you into a secret. I was shit in the 2023 Tour de France," and that was one of my favorite lines of the show.
Alaphilippe is the only one that made jokes,
Yeah,
and he made a couple different jokes.
yeah.
Did Jai
definitely
Hindley
did.
not make
He
jokes?
definitely
Yeah.
did.
I don't think not purposefully. Like I'm talking about like in like
Yeah.
the face to camera moments, right? Where like they know that they're on
yeah.
camera
Yeah.
and they're like looking at the camera with the lights and they made a joke and it lands.
Mm.
Alaphilippe did seem the most comfortable in front of the camera, and you know he was that kind of devil may care, not going to win anything, just going to be the bloke on the bus, the teammate, the friend, and the narrator of the show.
He's just
Looks a
so
little
cool,
like a
isn't he?
pirate.
He's
I
just
think-
cool.
He is pretty good.
Yeah. All right. Smooth Operator goes to Julian Alaphilippe. Congratulations, Julian. And of course, the Premier Award, the Jonathan Vaughters Understanding the Assignment Award. I mean, frankly, it would be a massive upset if this went to anybody other than Jonathan Vaughters, but we do have a couple other options. I think Patrick Lefevre understood the assignment.
Yeah.
I think Richard Pluga might have really understood the assignment, which must have been make everyone hate you. I think was maybe the assignment that he was given. Who else?
I think Patrick Lefevre should be ruled out, or at least not come in the top, whatever. Because I don't think he did anything differently in this documentary to how he acts every other day of his life. And
True.
I think Jonathan Vaughters, he acts this way in a lot of media, but he was definitely, you know, the for this Tour de France, for this series, it was hammed up. And I think for the same can be said for Plugger. Whereas Lefevre, we know that that's just how he is.
He was barely in it though. He
that's the problem.
they got him set off at the start. Not even.
You mean Vaughters?
Yeah, he's barely in it.
He's pretty heavy in the first 2
Yeah,
episodes.
yeah.
2, 3 episodes.
No,
I've
just
already
the first.
I've
Is it
kind of
just the first
forgotten
one?
those
Just the first?
episodes. I mean,
Well, his main rider, who he talked about for so long, crashed out on the first stage, so he didn't have much more to talk about.
I mean, is Thibaut Pinot pulling root vegetables out of the ground, not understanding the assignment?
No, but I think to Kit's point, I think that's just who he is. Whereas Jonathan Vaughters had the absolute gall, the cojones, to say to Netflix that Richard Carapaz was the number one challenger,
number 3.
to Pogacar and Vingegaard at the Tour de France. If that isn't and then following that up with, if he fails,
I'm out of a job.
you know, the whole team might collapse, right? And then 5 seconds later, he falls off his bike and turns out the team is fine. Right. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but there's a reason why this award was named after Jonathan Vaughters. There is no. He is the champion, right?
Yeah. He just on that point, as we award him, that's just reminded me. Pogacar, who we see at the end of this episode, when he says winning that stage 20 gave him the confidence that he can do a Grand Tour and finish it well. Is he just forgetting when he won his first tour on like the final time trial? Like that was a Vaughters-esque moment.
It was.
Yeah.
It was. That's true.
He's parroting that you're only as good as your last race nonsense.
Honorary mention to
well done, Vaughters.
Honorary mention to Pinot, to all the rest. But the winner of the 2024 Unchained Jonathan Vaughters Understanding the Assignment Award is Jonathan Vaughters.
Woo!
Congratulations. All right, so final segment here. Final segment of the 8 episodes. I think we've sort of generally decided that we think that this series is better than the first series, right?
Yeah.
What are the other sort of, I don't know, reactions to it? What else have we not sort of discussed in terms of overarching reactions to this show? Do we feel like it does its job? What is its job?
I mean, it's the same happened last year, but I've had messages from people who, friends and family who don't follow cycling, and I try to avoid talking about bicycles or cycling with them. And they've been sending me messages. One of them's getting married tomorrow. And she sent me a message this morning saying that she'd listened to episode 3 of our podcast and that she was waiting to watch each episode so that she could watch the episode and then listen to our podcast and then so on and so on. And I said, you really don't have to. I'm sure it's quite low down in your priorities. And she sent me a 30-second voice memo. Said, yes, it's Unchained is fairly low down my priority list, but listening to your podcast isn't, because she likes to hear the chat around the race and the context around it. And I think that's what you get a bit more in this series than you do last year. There's more of the we did obviously we got to see into Wout van Aert's rather nice kitchen last year and a bit of family time. And so we have seen into the families before. There was a bit more emotion and a bit more humanity and passion, and just you got to see a bit more of what goes into the build up to the tour. Of course, there was the devastating inclusion of Gino Maida's death, which is quite an important theme that runs through the series. But again, I think, and when I first heard particularly moments like Ben O'Connor being told on camera, I thought, oh, that's ghoulish. But I mean, I think
but effective.
It was effective, and I think they did it. I think they did it respectfully. I think they did it well. And that, again, that adds some of that emotional gravity that it did have last year, but not to quite the same degree. It was a bit more, this is how it works last year, whereas we got to see a few more characters and a bit more of distinction between each episode and each team, each person we meet.
Are you sure your mate's not thinking of doing a runner if she's listening to this podcast the night before her wedding? Sounds like a bit of a cry for help.
It's either that or she might be like episode 4 is her first dance at the wedding.
Episode 8 is the last.
I just played that.
Episode 4 is the Gino Mater episode, so that would be rough. That would be
just
rough.
Slow dancing to Kaylee saying welcome back.
Welcome back, everybody. Ian, your reflections?
I liked it.
Or Johnny?
I think there is something in getting people that don't normally watch cycling intently to pay attention to it, the way that they package up the narratives and tie it all together. Of course, there's some dramatization, but I think that that's okay. It made me excited for the Tour de France. I liked revisiting it. I liked remembering all of the different storylines. So I think last season felt a little bit more like Tour de France for beginners, maybe, whereas this one feels a little bit more like there's something to enjoy for people that are already in that world, more genuinely like that than the previous season where people were watching it because they were like, oh, I'll give it a go. I also liked that last season it kind of focused on the obvious characters. This season there were segments with Pero Bilbao, Matej Mohoric, and riders that are lesser known that probably wouldn't have been chosen to be focused on. And I really enjoyed getting to see more of them as opposed to just the big stars. And Tadej Pogacar being included, I think, made a big difference.
Huge. Yeah. Johnny?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think If I think it's definitely an improvement on last year, which seemed at points quite random. And because I think it's probably quite a hard project to undertake because it's so hard to find the balance in between appealing to someone who's just flicking through trying to find something to watch and people who are coming for the series specifically. I think I think the easiest way for me to think about what I'd like to change, what I'd like to see next year, and I definitely would like to see some more fringe characters introduced who are interesting and have interesting stories. Like if there's more sprinter stuff next year, I don't really care for that. Like I'm not bothered. Like the Cav Will He Do number 35 episode, don't really care. Like it'll be like this year will be a big story, but I don't want to have to watch it 11 months later. The same with like Phillips and Winsfall stage. It's like I think we have to abandon that a bit. And I think I'd prefer it to Crescendo, which maybe it will because we've got a final day time trial or stage 20. No, final day time trial, stage 21.
Yeah, final day.
Yeah. 21.
So I hope they change the structure of it a bit so that we have the side quests for the first few episodes, and then the last 2 or 3 are like the GC battle, because that's not something you always will have at the tour. Like if the Netflix series existed in the Sky years, what the fuck would they cover? So definitely make hay while the sun shines. Is that what the phrase is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For now, and then figure the rest out later. But yeah, I think it's good. It's good. I think it's definitely been less popular. Like I think people have been less from like just hearing from people who watched it last year. Less people necessarily watched it. I think there's a lot going on at the minute. Like there's other big shows out on Netflix. There's other big sporting events going on. But people might come to it later.
A lot of that comes down to whether Netflix sticks it at the top of your feed,
yeah, it's
right?
weird,
like
isn't
it's
it?
Somewhat algorithmic
algorithmic
and things like that.
Yeah, and there was some initial data release that showed it wasn't performing that well. The second series wasn't performing that well, but then within the same report, it was like Netflix's whole one strategy is creating archives of shows so that basically people come across a show, like it, and then there's like 4 series for them to just absolutely tear through. So I hope they keep at it. I like the fact that it's made by like a French production company. I think it'd be a far inferior product if it was like Brits and Americans trying to explain the tour to a global audience.
Yeah.
It would just lose that. Like they wouldn't focus on Groupama in the same way or get the same out of them. They wouldn't have Alaphilippe speaking in French and it being not dubbed. What's it called? Transcribed. Subtitled. God, we need to stop making podcasts, fellas. I've absolutely done him.
Well, at least you haven't said oftenly yet.
True. What did you like it, Kaylee? Have you said your thoughts? Have you shared your thoughts? I've forgotten.
I have not. My thoughts remain roughly the same as they were after episode 1, which is I think they set the stakes a lot better than they did last year, and they were somewhat aided in the horrible story of Gina Mater, right? But it did serve to really effectively set the stakes for the sport as a whole, right? So like I mentioned this in episode 1, the personal stakes, the professional stakes, and like sort of the team stakes, right? The personal stakes were much clearer in this episode or in this series, particularly in the first 4 episodes than they were previously. And then we kind of step into more professional stakes and you know who's going to win the bike race and everything else. So I think that was done much better. I liked Ben O'Connor by the end, and I liked his inclusion. Yeah. And we were really down on him after, what was it, episode 3, I think? Because he just came across as this sort of petulant child, right? And then he really came around. I hope for his sake, most people watch the whole show because he's got a bit of a redemption arc. There's redemption arcs all over the place. Pidcock doesn't get one, but there's redemption arcs all over the place. Yeah, I thought that the characters they chose were really interesting and really good and somewhat unusual. And there's tons of other characters out there, right? Like there's so many stories from last year's tour that were left completely untold. Riders they didn't talk to, stages they completely ignored. So there's plenty of stuff, to go into next year. There's always stuff at the tour. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was better than last year. The stats on last year's I think were pretty good. It did was it better than the golf one or worse? It was better than the tennis and worse than the golf, or maybe the other way around.
Yeah, it was pretty good considering how many. And the problem is that everyone's trying to chase this drive to survive like bubble. But because they were the first to do it, and it also just the way that sport works just fits the structure of a Netflix series so much better.
And it was COVID.
And it's COVID.
We're all
yeah.
sitting at home with nothing to do, watching Netflix.
And it was the one year that F1 was actually really, really good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's good. I think I hope it stays. It's such a good thing to get you through June before and get you hyped for the tour and like refresh you.
Yeah, it's a weird month, June, in cycling.
So I think it's great. You know, I think it's easy for people who follow sport to be critical of it. But you know, take it for what it is. Like my pals are all watching it, and then they chat to me about it, which is, you know, before they literally didn't give a shit. So it's kind of nice.
That's great. Well, if you enjoyed this podcast series, we're about to step out into daily Tour de France podcasts, which have a similar vibe as a vibes-based organization. In fact, it will be, well, Johnny, you and myself for a little bit in the beginning, and then Ian shows up about a week in. We've got a bit of Ronan. Yeah, it'll be a good time. So make sure that you go and search Escape Collective wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you're subscribed to that channel. Or just check out escapecollective.com. You can find all the podcasts there. We've got sort of a little Tour de France hub that's ready with all the Tour de France stories. And if you like this pod, you like what we do, you like the stories, you don't want to get hit with a paywall, which you will in July. Well, you will anytime for us. Make sure you sign up. escapecollective.com/member. Sign up. We have a special promo going in July. It is $1 for your first month. So you can try it out for $1. If you like it, keep going. If you don't, well, at least we got $1 out of you. I think that's it. That is it from us. Thanks, Johnny.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ian.
Pleasure as always.
Thank you, Kit. You put this whole thing together. Huge amount of work. We really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
And we'll see you all next year or in like 4 days for the Tour Dailies.
Yeah, come and listen to the Tour Dailies.
One of the two.
They're quite
great.
something.
They're fun. All right. Bye, everybody.